Hey, my name's Kyle. Welcome to Modular Games. Today we're going to have our second episode talking about the core classes of D&D and rewriting them to be a little bit closer to the lore that those classes are based on. Today we're going to be talking about the Druid, the second divine spellcasting class in our series. Now, the Druids are really a very interesting thing when you try to look into the lore, because historically, Druids, I believe they were a type of Celtic priests, which were very important to their communities. They served in an advisory position to leaders, and they were very, very involved in their communities. However, to other cultures, they seemed to be a very, very, very strange group. They lived out in the forest. They seemed to be barbarians, and they were thought to worship the spirits of nature. And while this is not entirely inaccurate, the description of a druid in modern literature is wildly different from the historical accounts. In particular, it's interesting to see that druids and shamans historically would have been exactly the same thing, but in terms of how we see them in gaming nowadays, the shaman is fairly well defined. They have a close association with nature. They make deals and contracts and a close association with spirits, both the spirits of the dead and also the spirits of nature or of the natural world, and they gain their power through that source. Meanwhile, with druids, it's a lot more vague. They generally serve nature, and they're generally assumed to have some kind of power to transform into the shape of beasts, but nobody really understands why. And that makes it very interesting, or that makes it very difficult trying to align the druid with their lore, because really they've been detached from the core lore that they're based on for a long, long time. But we can still do a little bit of an effort on that. First off, I want to point out that there's a homebrew version of the class called Shamans, and that already uses the Warlock progression of spells. So shifting over the Druid to that same progression, given that they're theoretically the same thing as a Shaman, shouldn't be a problem. It's already been tested, a lot of people like that. So we'll go ahead and stick with the Divine Spellcasting progression. But what can we do to make it so that the Druid really is required to serve nature, really is required to have a close association with the natural world? Well, let's go ahead and take a look at this document right here. Here's the Druid right here, and I'm assuming that everything that the Druid has is going to be exactly the same as written, except for the spellcasting progression, which we went over in our cleric video. We'll go ahead and link that in the corner over there. And first up is at level 1, we have the Druidic language. As written, the Druidic language is an entirely fluff-based feature. It doesn't provide any mechanical benefits whatsoever. It might come up if your game master really wants to make it come up, but otherwise it's useless. So let's go ahead and add something a little bit more useful. The Druidic language is considered to be a very, very important thing in terms of lore. If a druid teaches the Druidic language to someone who's not a druid, then they are immediately cast out of their order, and they're not considered a druid anymore. Not only are they not a druid anymore, but they will be hunted down and killed because they taught the Druidic language, that secret language, to someone who is not a druid. Needless to say, this is not reflected in the mechanics of the game, and many game masters may not even be aware that that is intended to be such an incredibly gross violation of the Druidic oaths. I would like to propose a class feature that very much reflects this, and that is that the Druidic language, instead of simply being another language that your character is able to speak, it is the ability to automatically have certain spells prepared over. You have Speak with Animals prepared, you have Animal Friendship prepared, you have Animal Messenger prepared, and you have Speak with Plants prepared. All 4 of those spells are automatically considered prepared, assuming that you have a Druid level high enough to cast spells of those levels. 2 of those spells are first level, one is second, one is third level. These are all very useful spells, and honestly, if a druid goes out into the world, especially frustrating for new players, someone who's never played as a druid before, they'll prepare their spell list for the day, they'll go out into the forest, and they'll realize, this would be a great time to use Speak with Animals. I'm a druid, this is kind of my job. Why did I not prepare this spell? Well, if you introduce this class feature, you'll never have that problem ever again. Also, there is a Channel Nature ability. Channel Nature has 2 uses, and it is available at level 1. You may cast any of the spells on the Druidic language list by expending a use of Channel Nature. This is really helpful. It allows you to have a few extra spell slots so that you don't have to worry about wasting your spells when you speak with animals. You can just do it whenever you want because you have an extra 2 spell slots that are explicitly for speaking with animals and plants. Okay, once you get high enough level that you have Wild Shape will use this same pool of abilities. You expend Channel Nature uses to Wild Shape. So while we're on that note, let's talk about the Wild Shape feature. Wild Shape has some really wonky balancing issues. First of all, the number of things you can do with Wild Shape it's a very big number. The only thing that I can think of that really grants you as many options as Wild Shape is spell casting. And there's a lot of spells, just like there's a lot of beasts in the monster manual or elsewhere. If you want to transform into something that doesn't have a stat block, like a 2-inch long lizard, you can still do that with Wild Shape. It's just up to your game master to figure out what the stats are going to be. Maybe you only have 1 hit point. You took that risk voluntarily. Okay, so why is Wild Shape difficult to balance other than the vast number of options? Well, there are the movement modes, there are the senses, and most importantly, there are the hit points. Whenever you Wild Shape in the current iteration of the rules, your hit point total will be reset to whatever number is normal for that animal, which means that at low levels you might have 10 hit points, and then you transform into a horse and you have 19 hit points. That's kind of weird. You doubled your hit points. What happens when you run to 0? Do you fall unconscious? Well, theoretically, yes. You fell to 0 hit points, therefore you're supposed to fall unconscious. But most game masters don't actually rule it that way. They allow you to just revert straight back to your druid form, which you're supposed to do, and you're still awake and conscious. You have as many hit points as you had before you Wild Shaped. Theoretically, you should fall unconscious because you went to 0 health. That's what the rules say. But that doesn't always happen at the table. And more than that, some of these animals at later levels, they're going to have a large amount of hit points. It can be argued that Polymorph is the strongest healing spell in the game, and Wild Shape is a version of Polymorph that's available very early in a character's career, at level 2 in 5th edition games. So in order to make the balance of Wild Shape a little bit easier, maybe we just take away that part of Wild Shape. Well, what's another change that you would make to Wild Shape to make it better? Well, a lot of people, not myself, but a lot of people are frustrated they can't talk while they're in animal form. And so just to ease the flow of play and make players, waste their Wild Shape uses a little bit less often, let's just let them talk while they're in Wild Shape. These 2 changes were both proposed by wizards, and they're honestly really good changes. I came up with these years ago, and some tables are willing to accept them, some tables are not. Some tables really like the fact that Wild Shape is overpowered at low levels. The power curve for this ability is a bit wonky, and if you're simply able to retain your hit point total, that's a big nerf early, which is fine, honestly, and it's a big buff later on because transforming into that itty-bitty parakeet still retains the same hit points as your level 20 druid, which is going to be really weird for your opponents when the parakeet takes 6 or 7 arrows and is still not dead. Really, really entertaining role play right there. Okay, so let's talk about a few more features for the Druid. So first of all, I'll go ahead and point out that I'm going to be using the new unified progression for subclasses that was introduced for 1D&D, which means that your ability to wild shape could theoretically be pushed back to level 3. Instead of wild shape, I'm actually giving a feature called Druid's Path. This is a lot like the Warlock feature where they gain a Pact boon. You have one of 3 selections that you can make. The first one is Wild Shape, which we just discussed, and it's going to be using your uses of Channel Nature. The second option is Boundary Warden. Essentially, you gain proficiency in all martial weapons, and I'm not sure whether you should gain proficiency in heavy armor, but you do have the restriction on not being allowed to wear metal armor removed from you. And the third option is called One with Nature. You gain a few more uses of your Channel Nature ability, and you gain the benefit of the Tree Stride spell. Polymorph is a 4th level spell. Tree Stride is a 5th level spell. If you pare them down a little bit, they are allowable at low level play. So how does this work for Tree Stride? If you have One with Nature, then number 1, the distance you can travel and the distance that you can sense applicable locations to move to with Tree Stride is reduced to 50 feet. It increases by an additional 50 feet at levels 5, 9, 13, and 17, same levels that your cantrips progress. And so at level 17, you're going to have a range of 250 feet, which is half of the normal range that you would have for the actual Tree Stride spell. Well, what else? Well, with your One with Nature ability, entering into a tree in order to Tree Stride costs the use of Channel Nature. Exiting does not, but you have to do that in the same round anyways. What does this mean? Well, it means that the Druid can just walk straight into that oak tree and walk straight out of that oak tree several times per day. And it doesn't require an action to do it. It requires 5 feet of movement. 1 square of movement on a battle mat is the only action required for this Druid to teleport. Is that fair? Is that fair? Is that fair? Well, I think it is fair. You're going to be able to do this twice at low levels, and as you gain in levels, you gain a few more uses because the ability is really not strong enough unless you allow for those uses. And keep in mind, these short-range teleports, they're taking away from your ability to use Druidic speech. If you don't have your Channel Nature abilities, you're going to have to expend spell slots on Druidic speech. But One with Nature has another benefit, and that is, as I've said, you get more uses of Channel Nature. It's supposed to mirror the number of the number of uses is supposed to mirror your proficiency bonus, but we don't just declare it's equal to your proficiency bonus. We're going to go the barbarian route and say it goes up at levels X, Y, and Z, and it just happens to match your proficiency bonus. The same way barbarians have that on their rage damage bonus, happens to just, mysteriously happens to be the same as their proficiency bonus. Let's see, what else do we have moving along for Druids? So we've covered the biggest changes, but there are 2 more changes to cover. First is Natural Recovery. Natural Recovery is a new feature that I'm introducing for Druids because it's just really fun. And that is at level 7, whenever they take a short rest, they recover 1 of their hit dice. Those hit dice that they expend in order to heal, they get an extra 1 every time that they take a short rest. Well, guess what? They're also going to gain an upgrade to that at level 15, where they recover 2 hit dice when they take a short rest. But they recover these hit dice at the end of their short rest. They cannot spend those same dice at the same time that they're recovering them, which is a minor detail, but it matters. And in this way, you have the flavor of these people are being constantly nourished by their connection to the natural world. All they have to do is take off their shoes, lay down in the grass, and the natural world starts healing them on its own. Okay, that's pretty cool, assuming that it doesn't break our game. Well, druids tend to be up close and personal with their opponents a lot of the time, and given that they're not gaining extra health from their wild shape uses, they'll be losing health a lot faster than they used to. Also, because the regular druid, not just the moon druid, but the regular druid will be able to have a large amount of health when they wild shape, it means that they're actually going to do that even into the later stages of the game. Even though they might not have the best options for wild shape, they're going to have a big boost in power comparatively by the fact that they retain their normal hit points. And so they're going to be willing to fight in animal form even if they don't specialize in it. And so they maybe need healing a little bit more than they used to. With a lack of spell slots, yeah, Druid definitely could benefit from more healing. All right, so what other details do we have? Right, we have the miracle. So what is the miracle ability that Druids have? Druids have an amazing ability called Nature's Bounty. And the name of this should tell you a little bit about how the ability works, because Nature's Bounty doesn't belong to the Druid, it belongs to the world. And so when a miracle occurs for a Druid, it doesn't necessarily belong to that Druid at all. Now, Druids gain the same progression of miracles per day that any divine spellcaster is going to get. They can cast miracles that are up to a level equal to what you'd expect on spells for an arcane spellcaster. And at level 2, they gain access to miracles for the first time. At level 6, they gain access to their second miracle each day. And at level 13, they get access to their third miracle per day. They are not allowed to use 2 miracles of the same spell level in a single day. Now, so what is the flavor of miracles that Druids have? It is actually a lot like a certain arcane spell, Glyph of Warding. Druids are able to store a miracle, a Druid spell, inside of a living plant. And at the time that the spell is stored in the plant, the Druid specifies certain conditions upon which that spell will be released and cast as though by the Druid. Now, this storage only lasts until the Druid finishes their next long rest. So they don't get to store these things up forever. They simply have the ability to have a number of them stored equal to their maximum number of miracles. So, yeah, that's just like Glyph of Warding, right? Wrong. One detail that I missed, the Druid is not allowed to specify the type of creature or the type of person that is going to trigger this spell to be cast. They cannot specify a command word. They have to specify a set of actions which a sentient or non-sentient creature could perform that is going to trigger this spell to be cast. Let's say that they enchant an apple tree, that the next time that an apple is pulled down from the tree and eaten, whoever ate the apple is subject to a sleep spell. Hey, there's a story about that. Yeah, I've heard of that. I like that one. Okay, so maybe the next time someone tries to push their way through these bushes, these brambles, they suffer spike growth. It's centered on them. They triggered it after all. But the Druid's not able to control these spells. The Druid's not able to control these spells after they're cast. All of the actions and controls that are set for these spells must be specified at the time that the spell is stored. Also, tell me in the comments below, should the Druid have to concentrate on these spells when they are released from the storage? Now, a few more details. Let's say that the plant that the spell is stored in happens to die. Well, in that case, the spell, assuming that it wasn't triggered and released, is going to be wasted because it has to be stored in a living plant, not just in a plant. It would be silly to be able to cast these spells into your walking stick. That's completely unfair. Now, as a few additional details, because these spells are stored in a specific location in something that's alive, that means that the Druid might have to travel away. The Druid might not have to travel away, and that means that they might not actually get the benefits of these spells, but someone else might get the benefits of these spells. The miracle doesn't belong to the Druid. Nature doesn't belong to Druids. Nature doesn't answer to the Druids. The Druids answer to nature. And that seems to be pretty cool, doesn't it? It kind of reinforces the idea of the Druid's Grove, where you're going to have 2 or 3 Druids get together, and they're going to tend to a grove of trees, and they're going to do their best to empower this grove or this, natural environment to thrive. So what are they going to do? They're probably going to imbue magic into this, Druid's Grove in order to make it a little bit more special. And the ability to use nature's bounty, the ability to infuse miracles into the trees themselves, I mean, that just sounds like a Druid, doesn't it? It's a lot of fun. It's what the Druid's been wanting to do for so long, but they couldn't because there were no mechanics to support this. The Druid was just some other kind of priest. That's about it for the Druid. It's fairly exciting. I hope that you like it. Leave your comments down below, like the video, subscribe, do those things that YouTube people ask you to do, and I'll see you in the next episode.